The days that followed the wedding night were tense, filled with quiet uncertainty. Princess Ilara remained in the castle, moving through the corridors with careful grace. She noticed every shadow, every flicker of Kale's stormy eyes, wondering if the beast within him would emerge again. Yet in those rare moments when he smiled, when his voice softened, she felt the man beneath the curse, a man who longed for connection and trust. Kale, meanwhile, paced his private chambers, restless and haunted. The memory of his transformation, of the fear in Ilara's eyes, burned in him like fire. He had fought with every ounce of his being to hold back the wolf, but the struggle had nearly consumed him. Every step he took through the castle echoed with guilt. He had vowed to protect her, yet he had almost failed. The kingdom outside was uneasy as well. Rumors of the Lycan king's nature had spread, and whispers of fear mingled with curiosity. Some nobles questioned Ilara's courage in marrying him, while others doubted the stability of their union. But Ilara remained resolute. She understood that Kale's curse did not define him. It was only part of the man she had begun to trust, the man she wished to understand. One evening she found him on the balcony, staring into the forest. The full moon rose high, casting silver light across the stone towers. "Kale," she said softly, stepping beside him, "you should not face the moon alone." He turned, his eyes dark and haunted. "I cannot let it take me again," he murmured. "And yet I cannot ignore it. The beast within me is part of who I am, whether I like it or not." Ilara reached for his hand. "Then let me help you," she said. "I will not run. I will not fear. We can face it together." For a moment, Kale seemed unsure. Then slowly he took her hand, feeling the warmth and courage that radiated from her. "You truly mean that?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. "I do," she replied. "You are not alone anymore." Days passed and their bond deepened. Kale taught Ilara about his world, about the forests, the wolves, and the magic that ran in his bloodline. He showed her the hidden corridors of the castle, the rooms filled with ancient artifacts, and the library of forgotten spells. Through it all she listened, not with fear but with wonder. One night, as the full moon approached again, the tension returned. Kale's form began to shiver, the beast stirring within him. But this time Ilara did not shrink back. She stood beside him, her hand in his, her gaze unwavering. "You can fight it," she said softly. "I am here. I trust you." He looked at her, a mixture of fear and longing in his eyes. Then, taking a deep breath, he focused on her touch, her voice, her presence. The wolf inside him roared, demanding release, but Kale resisted, grounding himself in the trust that Ilara offered. The transformation passed more slowly this time, and when it ended, Kale fell to his knees, exhausted but victorious. Ilara knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You controlled it." Kyle lifted his head, his stormy eyes meeting hers. "No," he said quietly. "We did it." Their trust grew stronger with each passing day, but the peace was fragile. Shadows lurked beyond the castle, enemies waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One evening, a messenger arrived, breathless and frightened. "My queen, my king," he stammered, "a dark force gathers at the border. It seeks to exploit the king's curse and bring war upon our lands." Kale's jaw tightened. "Then we face it," he said, voice firm. "Together." Ilara stood beside him, her heart steady. "Yes, together." The journey to the border was tense. The forest seemed alive, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Kyle moved with predatory grace, his senses alert, yet restrained by the trust he had built with Ilara. He felt the beast stir occasionally, but he calmed it with thoughts of her courage, her unwavering faith in him. They arrived at the edge of the kingdom to find the enemy, a group of sorcerers, cloaked in black, wielding strange dark magic. They had come to provoke Kale, to force him into transformation and chaos. Kale stepped forward, his stance protective. "They will not harm you," he told Ilara. "Stay behind me." But Ilara did not move. "No," she said. "We face this together, just as we promised." The sorcerers laughed, mocking the human princess who dared to stand beside a Lycan king. "You cannot control him forever," one sneered. "The beast will rise, and your love will fail." Kale's gray eyes darkened. "You underestimate her," he said quietly. "And you underestimate me." The battle began under the moonlight. Kyle fought with skill and precision, controlling his inner beast, using strength and speed without losing himself to rage. Ilara supported him, not with weapons, but with clever strategy and courage that guided him through danger. Together they moved like one, His power, her intelligence, their trust intertwining to overcome the dark force. At a crucial moment, Cale was cornered, the beast threatening to take over. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady, her hand on his arm. "I trust you," she whispered. "I am not afraid." He felt her words like a lifeline. The wolf within him growled, but Cale focused on her touch, her voice, her faith. Slowly, the beast receded, and Cale struck with clarity, defeating the sorcerers and banishing their dark magic from the land. After the battle, the moon was high and red in the sky, casting a strange glow over the forest. Cale knelt beside Ilara, exhausted but alive. "I could not have done this without you," he said. Ilara smiled, brushing her fingers through his hair. "And I could not have faced it without you," she replied. Cale's hands cupped her face, his stormy eyes soft and vulnerable. "You saw me. All of me," he said. "The beast, the king, the man who has feared himself for so long. And you still trusted me." "I did," she said simply, "because I see you, Cale. Not just the curse, not just the legend, but the man who is willing to fight for love, for us, for our kingdom." He pulled her into a gentle embrace, a mix of relief and longing. For the first time, Cale felt whole, not as a monster, not as a king, but as a man who could be loved and could love in return. The following days were filled with quiet triumph. The kingdom praised their courage, but Cale and Ilara needed no external validation. They had proven to each other that trust and love could overcome fear, even in the face of darkness. One night, standing on the castle balcony, they watched the moon rise, its light painting the stone in silver. Cale took Ilara's hand in his, holding it gently. "The curse is still part of me," he said. "It will always be a shadow at the edge of my life." "I know," she replied. "But shadows are not always enemies. We can walk together through them." He smiled, a rare, soft expression that lit up his features. "Then we will," he said. From the forest below, a single wolf howled, a reminder of the wild world beyond the castle walls. Cale and Ilara did not flinch. They stood together, united by trust, courage, and the beginning of love that had grown through fear and struggle. And though the moon cast long shadows over the kingdom, Cale and Ilara had learned that even in darkness, light could be found, not in the absence of fear, but in the strength to face it together. Part 2 ends with a cinematic, poetic hook. The wind carried whispers through the towers, and distant howls echoed from the forest. Cale tightened his hand around Ilara's. Together, they looked toward the horizon, knowing that while darkness would always linger, so too would their bond, strong, unbroken, and ready to face whatever the world would throw at them next. Princess Ilara stood at the edge of the balcony, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. Below, the kingdom's grand castle stretched into the night, its towers glowing under the pale light of the rising moon. Tonight was her wedding night. Her heart beat like a drum in her chest, not with excitement, but with a strange, anxious tension she could not name. She had been told much about her husband-to-be, Kael, the Lycan king. His name alone whispered fear across the lands. Tales of his ferocity, of his wild temper and mysterious curse traveled before him, coloring every thought about him. Yet when she first met him in the throne room weeks ago, she had seen something else. Behind his sharp gaze and commanding presence there was a quiet sorrow, as though the weight of the world and of himself rested on his broad shoulders. The doors of her chamber opened and her handmaid stepped in. "Your Highness, he waits for you in the hall," she said softly. Ilara nodded, her throat tight. She wrapped her fingers around the edge of the balcony, staring into the shadows of the night forest beyond. The wind whispered among the trees, and she imagined the world was holding its breath with her. Tonight, everything would change. The great hall of the castle was decorated with banners of both their kingdoms, silver and black weaving together under the candlelight. Courtiers whispered, stealing glances at the Lycan king who stood at the end of the aisle. Cale was taller than most men, his shoulders broad, and his eyes a stormy gray that seemed to look through the walls themselves. His black hair fell in waves to his shoulders, and his expression was unreadable, a perfect mask of calm and command. As Ilara approached, she felt the gaze of everyone in the hall, but she only saw him. The fear in the court could not reach her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Cale's eyes met hers. For a moment, time slowed. She saw the faintest flicker of emotion in them. Relief, perhaps, that she did not tremble at his presence. His voice, low and controlled, reached her ears. "You don't have to fear me," he whispered. Though the words were barely audible over the rustle of silk and murmured greetings, Alara's lips curved in a small, hesitant smile. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the man who had been both a stranger and a shadow in her thoughts for so long. The ceremony was brief, conducted by the kingdom's high priest, who spoke of unity, loyalty, and the strength of marriage, but Alara felt none of the grand joy that the others seemed to display. Instead, she felt an undercurrent of tension, a thread of unease she could not ignore. She saw it in Cale's hands, which clenched at his sides in the slight tightening of his jaw. When the priest finally pronounced them husband and wife, a hush fell over the hall. Cale stepped forward and took her hand in his grip firm, almost protective. She felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from a strange mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. After the ceremony, the guests retired to the feasting hall, leaving the newlyweds alone in the upper chambers of Cale's castle. The room was large, dark, and imposing, decorated with tapestries that told stories of his ancestors. The moonlight spilled through tall windows, casting silver shadows across the stone floor. Kyle turned to her, his gray eyes searching. "Ilara," he said, his voice gentler now, "I know stories have frightened you, but I am not the monster they speak of. You must believe me." Ilara met his gaze steadily. "I believe there is more to you than the stories," she said softly. For a moment, the walls between them felt thinner. Cale's lips curved in the faintest of smiles, and he took a step closer. "Then you will have to trust me," he said. "All of me." Ilara's heart pounded. She wanted to reach out to take his hand, but hesitation held her back. Trust was not given lightly, especially to a man whose very nature was shadowed by a curse. The night deepened. The castle seemed alive with quiet whispers. The rustle of tapestries, the sigh of the wind through the towers, the distant howl of wolves in the forest. Cale walked toward the balcony, and for a moment Ilara followed him, keeping a careful distance. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, his voice low. "The curse. It is not something I can fully control. On nights like this, when the moon is full?" He trailed off, his eyes darkening with a shadow of pain. Ilara stepped closer, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "I am not afraid," she said. "I will not turn away." Cale's gaze met hers, and in it she saw a storm of fear, longing, and regret. "You do not know what you are saying," he murmured. "I could hurt you. I could—" "You won't," she interrupted gently. "I trust you." For a fleeting moment, the distance between them melted. Cale's hand brushed hers, a touch that was both hesitant and electric. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "You don't have to fear me," he whispered again. But the night had other plans. As the moon reached its highest point, a sudden shiver passed through Cale. His body tensed. His eyes darkened, pupils stretching into slits. Ilara gasped as she felt a strange heat radiating from him, a primal force that seemed beyond control. Kyle's voice changed, deeper, rougher, carrying a growl that made her heart race with both fear and fascination. He tried to speak, to calm himself, but the beast inside him was rising, demanding release. "Ilara, stay back," he warned, though his words were almost drowned in the sound of his own transformation. Stone walls shook. Tapestries fluttered, and in a flash of silver light, Cale's form changed. Fur dark as midnight covered his skin. Muscles grew, and eyes that were once stormy gray became wild and luminous. The Lycan king, her husband, was no longer fully human. Ilara froze, her heart pounding, every instinct screaming to flee. But something deeper, stronger, rooted her to the spot. She did not see a monster. She saw him. She saw Cale fighting to hold on to the last pieces of himself, fighting not to harm her. The room was a whirlwind of power and shadow. The moonlight illuminated the fur and claws, and for a moment she thought the stories were true. But then, in the midst of the fearsome presence, she saw the eyes she had come to trust, the same eyes that had begged her to believe him. "Ilara." "Trust me," Cale growled, his voice torn between the beast and the man. Her hands shook, but she stepped forward. "I trust you," she said firmly. "I am not afraid." He froze at her words, a shiver running through the massive creature. The tension between them hung like lightning, sharp and electric. Then, with a violent struggle of will, Cale began to shrink, to return to his human form, sweat dripping down his brow, chest heaving. When the transformation ended, he stood before her, breathing hard, his eyes wide with both relief and shame. I tried," he whispered, his voice raw. "I could not let it take me completely. Ilara reached for his hand, her touch light but unwavering. "You are not alone," she said softly. "We will face this. Together." The rest of the night passed in tense quiet. Neither spoke much, but a fragile bond had been formed, built on fear, trust, and the beginning of understanding. As dawn approached, Ilara sat by the window watching the first light touch the castle towers. Kael stood behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders, a silent promise of protection. Neither of them knew what the future held, or what darkness would rise against them. But they both understood this. Their marriage was more than a union of kingdoms. It was a test of trust, of courage, and of hearts willing to see beyond the fear. And deep in the forest beyond the castle, wolves howled, as if heralding the start of a new and dangerous chapter, one that neither the princess nor the Lycan king could yet foresee.